Franklin Merrell Wolff, The Pathways Through to Space, The Symbolism of the Butterfly, September 25. The life cycle from the egg through the caterpillar and the chrysalis to the butterfly constitutes one of the best symbols afforded by nature of the progress of the human soul from birth into the world, thence through the development of subject-object consciousness, and then finally culminating in the translation to the transcendental consciousness by means of the second birth. Since our interest is centered upon the second birth, we are concerned primarily with the transition from the caterpillar to the butterfly rather than with the birth of the caterpillar. The caterpillar represents life on the level of subject-object consciousness, which is life centered in egoism. The butterfly symbolizes cosmic or transcendent consciousness, while the chrysalis is a good representation of the ordeal of the transition, known in the Christian world as the Passion, culminating in crucifixion. The life of the caterpillar is one confined to crawling on surfaces, and thus it may be said to represent a kind of two-dimensional consciousness. The primary concern of this life is nutrition, and this consciousness can comprehend nothing save in terms of crass utility. Hence, the typical caterpillar philosophy, if for the moment we may assume on the part of the caterpillar enough self-consciousness to develop a philosophy, must be such as would predicate reality and value of that alone which affects sensation, particularly in relation to nutrition. Thus, ideas would be significant only insofar as they serve as a means which affect a fuller sensuous life and supply creature utilities. In radical contrast, the life of the butterfly involves free movement in the air and therefore very well symbolizes a three-dimensional consciousness as contrasted to the two-dimensional life of the caterpillar. The primary concern of the butterfly life is mating and depositing eggs, with nutrition reduced to a distinctly subordinate position. Further, the typical nutrition of the butterfly is confined to fluids and thus contrasts radically with the gross nutrition of the caterpillar. The butterfly life and philosophy may be said to center around creativeness and joy, and so beauty becomes an end in itself instead of crass utility. Thus, reality and value for the butterfly have a significance not only utterly different from that conceived by the caterpillar, but quite beyond the comprehension of the latter. The chrysalis represents a stage where the caterpillar dies as caterpillar. To the caterpillar consciousness, this must seem like an annihilation or blowing out, as nirvana does seem to the unillumined subject-object consciousness. But when viewed from the other side, as it were, the chrysalis is the open door to the free life of the butterfly. The butterfly consciousness has certain very clear advantages. The butterfly, as compared to the caterpillar, moves in a world of an infinitely vaster comprehension. It lives in space with the power to return to surfaces. It is thus in a position fully to understand surface relationships, the whole domain of the caterpillar, but in addition knows an infinitely richer world that is utterly unknown to the caterpillar. Further, it knows surfaces in relation to depth, and thus can master problems connected with surfaces that quite transcend the capacities of the caterpillar. This symbol is a peculiarly beautiful one. The restrictions of caterpillar life very well represent the limitations of the subject-object consciousness. From the perspective of the restricted subject-object consciousness, the final problems of philosophy remain without satisfactory conclusion and often involve unreconciled contradictions. These solutions are attained and the contradictions reconciled by those who have awakened to transcendental levels. This is due to the fact that the latter have the higher perspective symbolized by the butterfly and thus can comprehend the subject, object or surface world within the higher integration of space, representing here the higher consciousness. But as the world of the butterfly is inconceivable to the caterpillar, so likewise the integration of the God-conscious man is meaningless to those who have no glimpse of the reality beyond mere subject-object consciousness. Thus, without some degree of recognition, the philosophies of men like Plato and Hegel seem like something purely abstract and unsubstantial. These higher philosophies admittedly are largely not concerned with the production of mere sensual or experiential values and certainly give a very subordinate place to nutrition and the creature comforts generally. But when these philosophies are seen from the level of consciousness on which they are based, they are found to deal most emphatically with substantial actualities. They are written from the perspective of the real waking consciousness. Philosophies of the type of neorealism, pragmatism, and naturalism are conceived from the perspective of the surface consciousness symbolized by the caterpillar. At least this latter form of consciousness dominates. If now we restrict ourselves to the subject-object or caterpillar standpoint, the proponents of these philosophies do have the best of the argument. Essentially, they understand only the inductive or foot logic of the caterpillar. Their final authoritative basis is either the data of sensation or data derived indirectly through sensation. Their final thesis is that what is objective alone is real. On their own ground, they are apparently unanswerable. But for every man who has awakened to knowledge through identity, they are at once known to be in a false position. Plato knows, beyond any possibility of doubt, that he is substantially right, but he may well be quite incapable of doing more for the caterpillar type of consciousness than suggest a reality beyond the caterpillar level. The result is that argumentative conflict between these two great groups of philosophies is largely a waste of time because there can be no agreement on basic recognitions. Each may prove his case satisfactorily from his perspective standpoint, but the effect is simply one of sort of shadow boxing that accomplishes very little so far as convincing the opponent is concerned. The awakened man knows the inadequacy of the caterpillar recognition, but cannot prove this to the caterpillar type of man. On the other hand, the latter cannot grasp the recognition of the awakened man unless he himself awakens. The result is a stalemate, unless the caterpillar man has adumbrations of a beyond. Of all men who are confined in consciousness to the subject-object manifold, those who see the primary problem of mankind as the one connected with economics are the ones most bound to the caterpillar level. For them, the life centers in gross nutrition and creature comforts, and this is precisely the dominant characteristics of the actual caterpillar. It is a pitifully restricted view. Mere increase of nutrition can only produce larger caterpillars. It can never solve the primary cause of human misery. For a man to realize the enduring joy, he must become so transformed that he enters upon the free life symbolized by the butterfly. It is doubtless true that some human caterpillars need to become fatter before they are ready to enter and pass through the chrysalis stage, but also many are ready now for that transition and are wasting their time in making themselves into overgrown caterpillars. If the latter think they are serving humanity by continuing in their present course, they are but fooling themselves. When they have awakened, and only then, can they competently serve that humanity, even with respect to the problems of social and economic organization. The primary significance of the chrysalis is that entering into the free state of space life is possible only through dying to the caterpillar level. Mere evolution, in the caterpillar sense, merely produces bigger and juicier caterpillars. There comes a time when a man must turn his back upon the whole of the form of life symbolized by the subject-object consciousness if he is not to be caught in the cul-de-sac of a wasted and barren existence. Of course, from the standpoint of the lower level, this does involve for a brief period an essential asceticism in some form or another. But the end is something indefinitely richer than anything contained in the old life, and in addition it is anything but ascetic. Attachment to lesser values serves as a barrier to the realization of greater values. This is a familiar principle, even within the limits of ordinary life. It applies even more forcefully with respect to the attainment of the supreme values. Yet, many human beings cling to values that are relatively no more than child toys, and thus refuse to take the steps that opens up a life of glory, freedom, and power. Is not this the supreme folly?